Welcome, everybody, to Legal Tech Week for February 17th, 2023. We've got a full house of panelists today, and so many that we had to cram two into one room. But this is Bob Ambrogi. I will be moderating today. I write the blog Law Sites and have the podcast Law Next. And we have a guest panelist today, He's an occasional panelist. He's with us sometimes, but let me introduce him first. Steve, you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey, Steve Lerner, senior reporter from Law 360. Thank you so much, Bob, for having me on the round table today. Hope everyone's doing well.
Yeah, and taking time off from her personal day off is Niki Black.
I am Niki Black. I am the Senior Director of SME and External Education at MyCase/LawPay/AffiniPay. I write legal tech columns for Above the Law, ABA Journal, and the Daily Record, among other outlets. And I also oversee and write the My Case and Law Pay Legal Industry Survey that we publish annually, and our 3 benchmark reports. And I'm super excited for the stuff we're talking about today. There's some really cool things going on in the R space. So I can't wait.
There are. And Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal, covering business of law and technology. And I've noticed a lot of people just in this area seem to have the day off. And then a Monday as well. So it's like an extra long President's Day weekend, which is nice. But I don't really see why people like Millard Fillmore and James Buchanan get merit a 4-day weekend. But that's just me.
Not to mention a couple of recent ones. Steve Embry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads about legal technology and innovation. I'm also the chair of the ABA Law Practice Division, and want to make sure and invite everyone to our ABA Techshow, which is going to kick off in about 10 days, week after next. So I hope to see a lot of you there.
Can't wait for that. And a twofer for you from somewhere outside of the greater New York area, I guess. I don't know where you are actually, but you too.
Statler and Waldorf. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the podcast Thinking Like a Lawyer and NYU class of 2001. So
and then NYU class of 2002, Stephanie Wilkins, editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM. And I am squatting at Joe's house for a couple of days over the long weekend with some other friends. So here we are.
Sounds like fun. Next time, invite all of us, Joe. We'll have a big legal tech week broadcast party or something.
Our pair of classes of NYU law are weirdly overrepresented in the legal journalism world.
And legal tech too.
And tech now, in particular.
Yeah. There's been a few classes like that out of NYU law, but that's good. Since we have a guest, I'd like to let our guest go first, and he's going to talk about something that may sound a little bit familiar if you've been with us the last couple of weeks, because we've already talked about it in various. As this story has continued to evolve, we've talked about various aspects of it, and now there is more news and kind of the continuing saga of DoNotPay. So, Steve, you want to tell us what's going on?
Yeah, so this week you had a paralegal, Catherine Tucson, who filed a petition for pre-suit discovery. That happened officially Monday, and it was a pretty interesting petition. So in the petition, Catherine kind of goes over what she saw with the platform, just to give everybody kind of a brief recap. She signed up for DoNotPay in January, tested out a few of the tools, claimed that some of them did not work as she anticipated them to, told the world about it on social media, got in contact with the founder of DoNotPay, and then it goes on from there down a very dark rabbit hole. Last week, the founder of DoNotPay went on Bob's podcast for some reason to talk about his side of the story. And so this week you had the petition that came out. Just reading through the petition, it was very, very well worded, very, very strong, calling DoNotPay a $36 fraud. Theranos was mentioned 9 times in the petition. which that's not an accident. I think that was intentional. And then really the petition goes into a great deal of detail about what Catherine, what she experienced when she went through DoNotPay's platform, claiming that the platform spit out an amateurish designed and poorly reasoned document wizard created demand letter. She performs forensic investigations for work, so she was able to look at the one document that she got out. Two of the documents she didn't get right away, as she supposedly said. She did a forensic investigation of that one document and could spot errors that an AI would have picked up on. And then she took a look at the structure of the data and of the Microsoft Word file and found that it was basically very similar to a Google Docs plugin and wasn't really AI based on what she could see. And so that was kind of the heart of the petition. And then on top of that, I reached out to DoNotPay and wanted to get their side of things. And of course, they said some comments that probably people saw online. Real quick, DoNotPay said that instead of finding a real consumer that was harmed to sue us, the lawyers at the firm of Catherine Tucson sent her to sign up and create a bunch of fake DoNotPay cases. And then this quote really got me. Of all the people to be replaced by AI, paralegals will be the first. Today, the DoNotPay robot lawyer is being attacked in court by an angry paralegal to try and stop our service from operating. It's like the dinosaurs suing to stop the ice age. And then from there, DoNotPay also said that it's a business of its size is becoming a blackmailing target of money extracting lawyers, especially a business trying to replace us, but nobody close to the company is concerned. So now it is going to be in some type of legal matter. So DoNotPay is in a lot more trouble this week than last week, it seems.
It just keeps getting deeper.
Joe could hear all the things I was muttering under my breath while we were muted. It's Catherine Tucson week, because I also had a long conversation with her yesterday for almost an hour and a half. I typing up wrote up a Q&A that I'm going to be published like right after this. But yeah, I mean, she's particularly out of the box addressed the notion that her employer put her on this. She was like, no, I do this for a living. Like, they're supporting me, but they had nothing to do with this. And she's smart. People are like, I feel like people are using paralegal as some pejorative term, which A, it's not. And B, she's been a paralegal for a little bit. She used to do tech support for Microsoft. She is a forensic investigator. She knows how to take apart a file in a way that I don't. And so, I mean, she's not just on some crazy person crusade here to, and she filed a claim for $36. It's not like she's even trying to, I mean, and this will be much bigger, obviously, if it takes off, but she's actually very fascinating to talk to.
Yeah. My one quibble would just be, when you say errors that an AI was going to pick up on, I think we've talked a lot in the last few weeks that AI seems to be making errors all over the place. So I don't know what exactly it was supposed to figure out. If it can't figure out Clarence Thomas, I don't know if it's going to get that. But otherwise, yeah, it seems like DoNotPay has decided to double down when walking away with grace would have probably been a smarter move.
I had somebody say to me, well, so what if they're claiming to be AI and they're not? Isn't that what every legal company does? Couldn't argue with that. I don't know.
Right. But I mean, but isn't that part of the problem that, plenty are, but some aren't? So nobody's going to actually trust the things that are real and doing good work.
Yeah. And obviously I'm being facetious.
I know you are. I know. Bob, you and I are very much aligned on this.
But it's also interesting. I mean, this is not even this is the petition they filed is, I guess, something under CPLR in New York that it's a sort of a pre-suit actually to preserve evidence that could potentially be used in a they're talking about a potential consumer class action here. And to try and get access to some of that evidence to see if in fact it substantiates a claim. So this isn't even a full lawsuit at this point. It's really kind of an exploratory move, I guess, on her part. Somebody who knows New York civil practice better than I might better understand the situation there. But it's an interesting move on their part.
Yeah, I mean, I think she wants to get the facts straight before bringing the actual suit. I think that's kind of the idea here.
Well, and she wants, I mean, she has whatever evidence, but she's afraid it's going to disappear and not for invalid reasons. So I think that was the whole move, was to preserve this evidence in advance.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. I think it was a smart move to do this before filing an actual suit.
Oh, she knows what she's doing. She is.
No, wait, no, in this petition, did she file it via DoNotPay? I don't know if she, will it be right if it's not through
She
that?
has invited DoNotPay to
Into the
defend
forest.
themselves using their AI robot. That's for sure.
Or she used ChatGPT to draft the thing. I mean, well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think, based on just what we know about like e-discovery, practices and whatnot. I mean, they should, considering all the bad press and all the potential problems that they've been encountering over the last couple of weeks, they should probably be under the assumption that they're probably going to get sued at some point. So, which anytime litigation is reasonably anticipated, you have like a duty to preserve your evidence and your data anyway. So, I mean, if they were to like start, not shredding documents, but like whatever the digital equivalent of that is, maybe throwing the laptop into a wood chipper or something, then they would have a whole lot of other problems that would go beyond just whatever PR problems that they're coming up with. But it's just, yeah, I was just kind of going back to Bob's podcast about it. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I heard parts of it. It did kind of seem.
Well, you've got all weekend to go back and listen to the rest of it. So.
but just like once he was like, "Oh, it's a big nothing burger," I was like, "Oh."
I mean, that's the thing, is he seems to be, he just has this tone deafness about him. I mean, I honestly, was interested in hearing what he had to say in the podcast and how he would respond to some of what's been said. And he just, from the first time he started talking, basically, like as you say, with the nothing burger comment, he just went on to kind of denigrate the people who are being critical of him and not take seriously the issues that they were raising. I mean, he sort of gave in, oh yeah, they raised some UI issues we considered or something like that. But I mean, he's just dismissed all of this in a way that just shows such a high degree of tone deafness. I just don't understand it.
Well, and on the lawsuit point, I was on your podcast, Bob, didn't he say something along the lines of lawyers have been trying to sue us or bring us to court for years, and then they decided it just wasn't worth it?
He said, I asked him if he had ever been sued before, and he said no.
He has been. His company's
Steve's
been
article, I think you mentioned that they had been.
They were sued in it was dismissed in 2021, but it was a completely different claim. It was about telephone records or something. It had nothing to do with the actual technology that they have.
Yeah. Well, I could be thinking of something else, but I thought he said something to the effect of people are threatening or trying to find a way to sue us all the time, but ultimately they find it's not worth bringing the claim.
No, I thought he kind of said the opposite. I thought what he said was more that to say that she's a lone actor here in terms of bringing a lawsuit against him. And in all their years of operation, nobody has taken any kind of an action against him like that before. He tried to portray her as kind of a renegade or something rather than having some legitimate claim.
But this gets to one of the things that one of my articles about this is that part of the reason no one's gone after them is because they stayed, pun very much intended, in their lane. When they were doing traffic court, there's not a lot of people who had a lot on the line to go after them. When they get out of that business, then they might have some issues. And I think that's what we just saw.
Right.
Well, and going back to the litigation point, I think it was really smart of her to file that preserve the evidence, because once you get wind that as long as you have procedures in place to destroy evidence every 90 days or whatever the case may be, people have to manage their digital data, and smart companies manage their digital data by deleting what doesn't need to be on their servers anymore and having a process in place to do that. And then once there is, like Victor said, reason to believe the litigation may be filed, then you have to start preserving it. But you can't rely on the person to agree with your definition of reasonableness in terms of, is a lawsuit imminent, and then also just err on the side of caution. You always have to assume that everything's not going to go your way when you're litigating, and to do everything you possibly can to protect your client's rights, or in her case, I guess her rights, since she's litigating on her own behalf, from the get-go. And so what she did was super smart, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And the other thing I did want to mention was his response sort of reminds me of the response of a lot of other people over the years that we've talked about on this podcast, and even predating this. When certain types of companies that kind of do these cutting edge things, when something blows up in their face, it always seems to me like the CEOs have a certain personality type where they always kind of respond in this way rather than doing the more diplomatic route of response. So I'm sort of not surprised by his response, just based on history and other CEOs in similar positions.
But often they're at least slightly more reined in than going on talking to Bob for an hour in that same tone.
Good point. Fair enough. Yeah.
But no, I totally agree with you. But to the point that was just in the comments about how can a tool be an unauthorized practice of law, I talked to her a bit about that too. And it's just like the things that went into, so specifically for the traffic court tool case, they had said, we found a case that there was no evidence necessary under this jurisdiction. They would find that no evidence needed to be presented, so we would just be able to do this. And so she was like, who did that analysis and all of that thinking? The robot didn't. Somebody practiced that legal judgment and decided to pick a case and tell you how this case could go forward. Then with ChatGPT in your ear to only make a sentence that they were pretty sure the judge could not fight with. So and there's other things that go further. I know there's another point she talked about Bob with, but like, it's not just that they turned this whole case over from analysis from day one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you could, I mean, if there's zero evidence coming from that subpoena, whatever that they issue, however they framed it, like if that came back with there is nothing, I mean, that's something that they could have, that the machine could have said, this is a good case.
But they specifically said in this jurisdiction, this is a good argument for this kind of case,
Right.
For this kind of argument.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, and I think he admitted this in that podcast, that of the cases they were looking at, there was a human decision that this is the one we will allow the tool to be used in. But I don't know as though that's a practice of law decision.
But
I
you're
don't
not
know.
sure.
Yeah, they
mean,
cherry
I'm
picked
pretty sure.
the one that they knew would that they hoped would be dismissed on a procedural ground, so that they would not have to raise factual arguments or
Yeah.
other kinds of legal
But like,
arguments in it.
is the decision of picking a case, like when the ACLU or NAACP picks a test case, is the choice of the test case a practice of law, or is just the stuff you do in that case? I don't know. I'm not sure that that's a problem, but
But whether or not it's a problem, it's exactly what
Yeah,
was just
no,
in the
yeah.
comment. It's the we did this and we did this. Like, who is the we is not the robot. The we is DoNotPay. So whoever is exercising this judgment, whether or not it ultimately is UPL, are people.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's so it's not a question of the robot doing
but
it.
they're people for now, but then we're getting to the point where the AIs are creating software and tools. And so I wonder what happens the more removed we get from a person being granted, a person certainly created this tool that then spits out these recommendations. But there's plenty of evidence of AIs creating AIs, or having input on programming. Like, for example, even with ChatGPT, right? Like, you're a human, but you ask ChatGPT to code, which a lot of people have been doing, and then you use that to code something. So it's really the AI coded the tool. So it's interesting to see those different layers and how this is going to evolve with that happening.
Oh, yeah, we're just in AI inception. We totally are.
I've been saying we're living in a simulation for like a really long time. No one is buying this, but that might be a good segue.
I'm reminded, I'm reminded of the judge, and I can't remember, I think it was maybe Massachusetts or New York, that ruled that only a person can practice law, and a platform or AI program cannot practice law. So therefore, if a AI program does something, it cannot be the practice of law. Only a human can practice law, whether authorized or not. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, but it is kind of an interesting approach.
Yeah, and I think Mark Lorison just made this point. And I think actually Browder made this point in the podcast, that if you publish legal documents or sort of tips on how to present a case in the form of a book, you can do that. That's not the practice of law. And he's saying, well, if you can do it in a book, why can't you do it online? I don't know.
Well, for sure,
Unfortunately, I'm not an ethicist, but
for sure, the definition of unauthorized practice of law is going to have to evolve to address tools. Currently, it doesn't say that, but even within that, there will be lines. It's just, yeah,
Yeah.
we have to work
I don't know
on it.
about-
Yes, but it's going to have to evolve,
I don't
especially
know,
for access
Bobby.
to justice too.
To commit an unauthorized practice of law, don't you have to have a client? Is it possible to commit an unauthorized practice of law without having a client? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I just wonder.
Well, and when
that's
you
a good
write
point.
those books, typically the audience is lawyers, not always. Anyone can buy a book and read it.
well, NOLO,
Usually
you can get NOLO.
treatises about how to file a case or directed at lawyers, whereas this is specifically directed at consumers. So I think that that's somewhat of a distinction, but I also think the point that Steve just brought up was super interesting as well. I don't know.
Yeah.
There are any issues. Someone go research it or ask ChatGPT to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to move along, we got a lot of stuff to cover, but maybe in a sort of flip side of this story in some way is the Allen and Overy news this week. I think of the fact that it has now deployed Harvey throughout the firm, throughout its 3,500 plus lawyers. Harvey is the AI platform that I've actually talked about it a couple of times on this show because I was actually given a preview of it that I'm still not allowed to write about. They still told me I can't write about it under an NDA, but it basically is using the GPT model to in a legal setting to do everything from create summaries, help generate legal documents, help review contracts, a number of different functions. And it's, as Allen and Overy said, they are now the first law firm to kind of deploy the GPT model throughout the firm. I talked to the founders yesterday who said that's just the first, but they've got a number of other projects that they're working on to deploy this in law firms, similar to what they've done with Allen and Overy. And I think what's really interesting about it is they talked about the fact that this is very specifically being fine-tuned to the particular needs of each law firm that they're working with. I mean, they're kind of starting with the general GPT model that's been, trained on the internet, and then they're further training it based against a database of publicly available legal materials. Really, I think they've worked with a couple of the legal publishers to get cases and other materials, but then they go in and train it basically a third time or further fine tune it against the law firm's own, historical work documents, templates, whatever else. So that they said the model is so highly refined that it's almost incapable of the kind of hallucinations that we're hearing about with ChatGPT. And to be clear, this is not ChatGPT. This is the GPT.
Wait. So I'm confused by this. So they want to get rid of this hallucination problem. So they named it after a hallucinated rabbit. I know I'm talking specifically.
I think you might be the only other person who got that reference. I asked somebody about that.
On this show is that
rabbit?
age.
Like I said,
I went with
what
Harvey.
a weird thing to choose to name it. Anyway.
I went with Harvey Dent. That was the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh, that's a weird thing to
Me
call.
too.
Call it. He was like, why would you name it? Why would you name it after Two-Face?
Yeah. Two-Face. Oh, yeah. No, that's a good one too. Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah. I really struggled for a while. Like, what is the logic of this name? Anyway.
Jimmy Stewart is turning in his grave.
No, but I'm really curious to see how it plays out in the firm and what they use it for and how it works. Because I mean, they are the first ones to publicly say they've incorporated this for the workforce and letting people use it. I'm just super curious because unlike him, I'm very interested in this and I really want to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, he said, I forget now the number of my story, something like a quarter of the firm is using it like every day or something. And over the course of a month, 80% of everybody in the firm has been using it, which is just pretty remarkable, I think.
That really stood out to me for sure.
Oh, Birdman.
That stood out to me. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting was it kind of reminded me of when I met with, I think it was at ILTACon when LexisNexis was talking. I know some of you met with them too, about how they had with their API and how their API allowed different tools to use the law firm's database to provide to create access to information in a way, going into like linking into like Lexis's databases, like the names of people or the names of cases, but also just helping people locate useful information from the law firm's databases, which I thought was really interesting. And someone in the chat had asked, you know, if they're not using client data, then what are they using? I mean, it could be forms, right? It could be research or internal memos, right? There's a ton of different data that you could ask ChatGPT to like locate and also interpret as it relates to this particular case somehow, maybe, right? And I thought that just the fact that so many people had used it so quickly within a law firm was super telling. I subscribe to ChatGPT Plus and I use it all the time. I love it. It's a super useful tool, and I use it instead of Google. I don't know if the rest of you were doing that, but I use it more than Google at this point. It's a really great tool.
I mean, look, I have litigator brain, so I come at this a little bit differently. But from a transactional side, it seems like this would be the greatest thing in the world, because I remember my friends in transactional work when I was at the big firm were constantly saying that 90% of what their job, not that they did as a hack, but like partners told them, your job is to dig through the iManage database and find the smartest versions that we've already done of X clause. If you have something trained to go through that database and find it for you already, I mean, that's I get how they're at like 80% of people using it or something like that is all what I'm saying.
Well, and I
Right,
think
right.
people want to use it. And I know, interestingly, someone internally at our company asked me if any law firms were putting restrictions on their employees using ChatGPT. So we asked around, and the main answer was, we shouldn't have to, because that should be common sense to not do that. I'm like, I don't know that translates. But so even if there were, I mean, I would hope there were some restrictions. So if people were restricted from using it, this is like, if this were given to me by my law firm, I would absolutely dive into it.
Yeah.
So
Or as Warren Hagan says, they're all writing great notes to their spouses now.
I know, I snickered out loud.
there were a few red flags that I saw in the A&O story. I think it was the Financial Times who brought this up. They're not using the tool to cut down on billable hours. They're not going to use the tool to cut down on cost. They're not going to do it to cut down on staff. And they're telling their attorneys, if you use this tool, you have to go and double check all the facts afterwards. So it's not to cut down on cost. It's not to make things more efficient, because this will probably make things worse. Is it a vanity tool? That's what I've been wondering, is they haven't demonstrated the use of the tool in public yet. So I just, there's some red flags to me. It's an interesting story, but those are just some concerns I saw.
So your point is exactly,
It's a PR,
no,
PR push.
your point is exactly what I latched on to, that in the same press release, they were, lauding the use of this tool and how it's going to be great and efficient or whatever, but they were very clear to be like, do not expect a reduction in your billable hours.
Sounds like the unauthorized practice of law to me. I don't know.
But that's exactly
Well, it
where I mean,
sounds like-
Harvey's founders are maybe not being tone deaf, because they keep saying, "Look,
Yeah.
we do not see this as a replacement for lawyers or a substitute for lawyers. We although they do talk about it as a time saving tool, so that is maybe contrary to what the Financial Times story suggested. But they're making very clear that this is an adjunct to lawyers to help them do their work, and that they need to review and monitor and use their brains, and not just rely on the AI here.
Well, and also like even
So I suppose if you use the tool and don't meet your billable hour quota, then can the law firm sue to get your payback? Joe, that's a question for you.
Good question.
somebody did this.
All right. Well, while we're on the topic of robots in court, we've got not quite a robot in court, but what, Stephanie? A court using a robot? Something?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And I partly picked this because I know Niki will be really excited to talk about it too. Because a court in Colombia, the country of Colombia, Not like a Columbia Law School mock trial. The court of the
Yeah.
country of Columbia has held a court hearing in the metaverse, which, you know, we've asked around a lot of courts in the US and they're like, oh, we're nowhere near that, we're nowhere whatever, but they've done it, and it's fascinating. There is a YouTube video, it's entirely in Spanish. But it's, I mean, they did it, they employed it right away. And I mean, that's Colombia was the same country last week that had a Colombian judge used ChatGPT to write a verdict, an opinion.
Yeah.
So they're embracing it. They're jumping in.
I think the idea of like video trials can be challenging. I think it's also challenging to read the body language of an avatar. So in that respect, I don't think, you know, the trial in the metaverse is super useful. But, you know, if people are dispersed geographically and for some reason you want to bring in a complaining witness or something who's moved away, or I don't, you know, some other type of witness, an expert witness, it's an interesting way to go about it. But I think I would probably, as a former litigator, prefer Zoom over the metaverse at this point, simply because you can see expressions, even though you can't see them quite as well as you could in a courtroom. And the body language is muffled, is how I would describe it through Zoom. You just can't see it as well.
You can't see the body language of avatars. Don't you know that James Cameron has done groundbreaking work and Bing refuses to let you see it? I don't know if anyone saw that, Bing.
I tried, for the record, I tried to sell Joe on us doing a dramatic interpretation of Bing's unhinged conversations, and he didn't go for it.
Aren't they unbelievable? The professing love, saying they want to be human. They're going to take
Fighting
out
about what year it is.
I support Bing. Somebody asked like where Avatar was playing, and it was like, don't bother. It doesn't exist. Just refuse to see this movie. And I was like, I think robots are here to protect us.
Bing did try to talk Joe out of hanging out with Stephanie this weekend, saying you'd probably rather hang out with Bing.
And to be clear, I was going to play the role of the unhinged AI. I was not going to make him do that.
I liked one where it insisted it was still 2022 and it got really mad at the user. It was
That
like,
was that
no, it's
conversation.
2023. Look at your, and it said, look at your phone. It's like, I'm looking at my phone. It's 2023. Your phone must be broken. And it gave like all this advice on how to reboot the phone.
And then it devolved into just saying, you are a bad user. I am a good Bing.
Yeah.
Wait. Is Bing run by Josh Browder's press team?
Oh God! On the court hearing in Colombia, does anybody know why they did it in the metaverse? Was there was it just for fun, or was there some reason they thought that had to be done or needed to be done? Or
my impression, and so it was like our Latin America correspondent is the one that wrote this up, and you know she's fluent in Spanish, she was able to speak to people more about it.
Oh, you're a Latin American correspondent, like we all have Latin American correspondents, right?
Well, Legal Tech News doesn't,
but like
Legal Tech News doesn't, but ALM does, and I've gotten them interested in technology about these kind of things. Well, but seriously, and so I mean, they had identified this thing happening, and I was like, yeah, absolutely cover it. And I think it was the impression they were able to get between that and the decision being written by ChatGPT is that they have just even more so than us, maybe like their justice system is crunched. It like they just don't have the resources, they can't get enough people through. So I guess I don't know. I want to dig more into the details of the actual case that was heard. I'm assuming it was not a massive case with massive implications, but I think they're just really willing to experiment with this technology in the way that we're not. And even like there was a whole thing about how China, long before ChatGPT ever came out, we started having these conversations. Like at our Asia desk, again, to be that person, our Asia desk wrote a story about how AI has mandated lawyers to consider using AI long before we've been having these conversations. I think these other countries are just...
Yeah, China's AI is this person guilty? Hit the button. Yes, that's it. That's the AI.
All right, well, where do we go from there to online notaries?
Smooth transition.
Perfect transition.
I don't know.
So I wrote my most recently published Daily Record article. I'll put it in the chat about New York's online notary law. And the reason it was on my radar was because I am on the board of trustees for my local bar association, and I belong to the solo small firm section, and they have a listserv. Yes, they've got a listserv still. So there was a lot of debate in the listserv about New York's online notary law that just got passed. And so I read about it and I wrote about it. And there are a couple of things I think are really interesting. I mean, first of all, essentially what it does is it takes the temporary measures that were put in place during the pandemic that allowed online notarization. It creates a structure in which they have been formalized into, and promulgated into a law to allow online notaries in New York. And so that's the first thing that's interesting, right? This temporary, I don't think that had the pandemic not occurred, we would have online notaries in New York right now. It wouldn't have otherwise happened. But because of the social distancing requirements of the pandemic, there was the only way to get anything done. And so they put a temporary measure in place that's now become permanent. So it's just an example of all the different ways the bar has been moved because of the pandemic when it comes to technology adoption across our culture and also within the legal industry. So I thought that was really interesting. But then I thought the debate that was being had amongst the members of the listserv was also interesting. There were a couple of things that they raised that I thought were notable. The first was that the complexity of the procedural requirements was problematic. There were all sorts of hoops you have to jump through as a notary for a notarization to, be correct done properly under the new law. And then the required length of the record keeping requirements. They have to have a written journal of the notarization that has to be kept for 10 years. And then all of the digital data, the video and all of those, whatever else, other type of data, the chats, I don't know, has to also be kept for 10 years. That's a long time to keep digital data. So they were also, they thought that was problematic. And also the long-term impact on the availability of actual in-person notaries was discussed. And I think the reason a lot of the lawyers were getting riled up about it was because lawyers in New York, at least, you are a notary by right. As long as you're a lawyer, you can become a notary, which I thought was kind of cool as a public defender. I was like, I'm a notary, and I like notarize things. I thought it was awesome. But you can become a notary just because you're a lawyer. And years ago, when I asked one of my colleagues, I'm like, why is that? He's like, I don't know. We're the ones that make the laws. So that's why we get to do it without having to take the test. But anyway, I thought it was super interesting that it was the lawyers getting upset because they are notaries, and but they also rely on their secretaries or other people in their office to do this. And if online notarization becomes commonplace and the clients start demanding that, and then you have to do online notarizations, but you don't want to jump through all those hoops, it's going to make less people, I think, want to actually be notaries. And I think that's a legitimate concern, because then you're going to have to start paying for the service online if you don't have notaries in your office, or if you're no longer a notary because those complexities. I guess that's why they were upset, because you can still be a notary yourself and notarize documents, but you can't notarize ones that you're signing. But in any event, I thought it was just interesting that for any number of reasons, both the complexity is sort of an indication that lawyers are willing to move into the 21st century, but we still are going to make it difficult for anyone to do this. But I thought it was interesting just to see that this was happening and the reaction to it.
I mean, it's New York. They don't know. I will say I had to refinance this house that I'm currently in during the pandemic, and the lawyer on the other side of the deal was like, yeah, we need to find a way to meet with masks and yada yada to do this notarization. And I was like, you don't. And she was like, well, you don't understand. No, that is the law in New York. And I was like, I'm willing to say I understand this one thing way more than you do. But I still had to physically go and see her in like week 2 of the pandemic, because no one in New York actually follows rules.
I interviewed on my podcast last year, Pat Kinsell, who's the CEO of Notaries. Is that what it's called? Notaries, which is one of the a couple of the big sort of online notary platforms out there. But I thought it was really interesting talking to him, because he talked about how no sooner did they kind of found this company and he became CEO, then he realized he had to be a lobbyist and start going around state by state and getting the laws changed, because so many states at that point did not allow online notarization. So, I mean, it's interesting to think of a tech CEO going around state by state trying to pave the way for their product to be able to operate in each state.
That is weird because, like, what you're supposed to do is just stick a earphone in somebody going to court and tell them to just start telling a judge their thing. Why change the rule first? I am very confused.
The other thing that I thought was
They're
interesting
different
was,
approaches.
as a follow-up, I got an email from like a law firm manager in New York City somewhere who'd read my article and wanted recommendations for online notary companies. I just thought that was notable because it caught, you write articles all the time. You don't always get emails about them. And so this person was already in the process of looking into this. And it just is sort of like another indication that this is sort of the trend and where we're kind of going with that. So.
Well,
And
I'm
of
kind of
course, you
wondering why
referred them to the Law Next Legal Tech directory, right?
I did not. I reached out to our partner person and asked them who they talked to.
That's a great point because she referred them to the above the law legal tech
I
directory.
should have probably, right? I'll keep that in mind next time because I didn't have any off the top of my head that I'd worked with. So
Yeah.
it was definitely just pointing in the right direction. Good to know.
I wonder why they had over 10 years as the having to keep the records though, because like, look, I mean, if I'm a notary and I fuck something up and like I get sued for it, like, isn't the statute of limitations usually like what, like 4 years, 5 years for that? So then why would you need it 10 years? Like, who's going to sue you after 10 years? Like, I mean, I don't quite get that, but I guess, I mean, and if there's video files and like, and audio recordings and whatnot, that could take up a lot of space. So, maybe we should buy some stock in some cloud services there. But yeah, but otherwise, I mean, I think it's because like what Joe was saying. I mean, we refinance our house too at that point. But like, I guess the bank that we use, like they had a notary in house, so they just brought them with them to our house to do the documents, and that made it easy. But yeah, I can see how it could be a real pain, especially like if nobody can go anywhere.
Well, it was at a time where our state had already legalized doing it over Zoom. And this person was just like, I don't think that's the real law in New York. And I was like, huh, interesting.
Right. So Victor, are you saying people should possibly invest in, I don't know, law practice management software to store this type of data? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not offering any endorsements or any, but if you were to throw a few, treats my way, then no.
At Techshow, I'll just throw money at all of you guys. No, I won't. That was a joke.
So,
No, but like all of us, so it's not.
You heard it here first, right? You heard it here first.
she does that every year at Tech Show. It's like,
Niki rolling in her my case stock. She can.
all right. So Joe,
Yes.
you've got a report on working from home and data risks.
Yes. So, So FTI actually put out a report there, and it has a lot of stuff in it, not just this one observation about they working with Brad Blickstein, who they do a whole thing. Who I actually don't know, maybe even in the conversation. Who knows? Nope, not.
No,
Yeah, okay. But yeah, they talked to a bunch of executives and C-suite folks at a bunch of companies about data risks, data privacy, cybersecurity, yada yada. Lots of interesting insights, but of course it's a survey, right? So it's a perception issue rather than reality. It's what those folks are saying. And one of the observations, and it was a minor one within the report, but really struck me, was a large number of them were saying, well, work from home and hybrid work, that has massively increased the number of risks that we face. And all I could think is bullshit. Like, there's no way that's true for a lot of reasons. We all know there are 1,000,001 ways, and there have been since Citrix. I was on Citrix as a first-year associate. Like, there are 1,000,001 ways in which you can sequester at-home work into an environment where it's not really more at risk. Also, most companies have involved people working from home or on the road for decades at this point. Like, there's no linearity to this link. Like, if you add more people who are working from home, it doesn't change the risk. You've already either planned for the opportunity of this risk of people working outside of your environment and have VPNs and a bunch of other protections, or you don't. The idea that adding a few more people staying at home on Monday rather than just on Saturday and Sunday doesn't change that. And all I could think about it was, this is because they understand correctly, I think, as a strategic move. They understand that the CEOs and a lot of the old guard bosses are ready to pull the plug on working from home despite any data that anyone has come up with. And they know that when and if, and maybe even if, maybe more when than if, when the cyber attack comes and the breach comes, they can get out of responsibility for it by saying, oh, it's those pesky kids working at home. And they know that some boss is going to believe that because the bosses are already clearly buying.
Yeah, that actually syncs a little bit with a story I did this week on this Action Step survey on sort of high levels of stress among employees at mid-sized law firms. Of course, they cater to mid-sized law firms, so that's why Action Step did that audience. But they had reported that 72% of workers, including legal professionals and administrative professionals at mid-sized law firms, say they have experienced stress, burnout, and being overwhelmed in the past year. And that all of that stress leads to things like more errors and more things falling through the cracks and, more mistakes. And yet, the survey found that the workers who were able to work from home at least a quarter of the time or more, it felt far less stress. And therefore, it follows, I guess, that they would be far less likely to make those kinds of errors or whatever that follow from that stress and burnout. So it would seem to be, again, proof that it's just bullshit that working from home is a bad thing.
How did they define mid-sized? Do you remember?
It's kind of all over the board. It starts at from 10 and it goes up to over 100.
It goes from small to big, Niki. Come on, yeah.
Silly question.
Yeah,
sorry.
everything between small and big.
But on the bullshit front, I was just going to say, in my article about it, one of the things I noted was Goldman Sachs' CEO is like, we suffer massive productivity losses by people not being in the office. And there's a major research report by Goldman Sachs that says that that's not true. They aren't even listening to themselves. Anyway.
No, I read the same report, and that was a good angle, the work from home one. The thing that struck me about that FTI report, it's that the GCs are meeting with their executives. At least 39% of executives say they're meeting with GCs to discuss these data issues every month, and about 12% or so do it weekly with the GC. I mean, it just shows you the concern about data. But you're right about calling out,
and the rest are just ignoring their GCs.
Well, I had to find an angle. All of y'all had it. And all y'all were going to talk about something in there. I had to find where my niche was going to be, because there was a lot of great information in that. If people haven't read it yet.
All right, well, now to the conference report segment of the show, because we have a big one coming up, and Joe and I were at one over this past week. We were at the Filevine Lex Summit conference out in Salt Lake City, but I know Victor wanted to give a little bit of a preview of ABA Techshow, and I wouldn't be surprised if Steve wanted to weigh in on that a little bit as well. But Victor, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I did a fun podcast this week. Well, I got published this week. I did it last week with Guy Sakalakis. I always mess up his name, Guy Sakalakis. Yeah, it's before I did the podcast, I was like, tell me again, how do you pronounce your name? He's like, don't worry, I get it a lot. So, but yeah, he's co-chair of the planning board this year, and so we just talked about what are some changes that are coming to Techshow and whatnot. I mean, the big thing is that there's the 1660 session, which is the usual closer on Saturday, is going to be Friday now. So Friday will be a long day for people, but then it'll kind of segue into some fun stuff. Like I think they have some dueling pianos and they have some other things as well. And then so Saturday, I think it's just going to be like people can show up if they want and talk to people. More of a social thing as opposed to having to come and learn and do something substantive. But and also I think the other big change was they're having two keynotes this year as opposed to just one. There'll be one on Thursday, one on Friday. But really just the whole thing was just this idea of, and actually I'll mention this one since Jane's on Jane was on this thing. I don't know if she still is, but she's doing she and some other people are doing like a mock hearing for talking about like debating like a changing the ethics rule concerning alternative structures and whatnot. And that should be interesting. I mean, like, typically the keynotes tend to be just more just like someone talking at you and, just making a speech and then maybe taking a few questions. This one has a little bit more, of an interactive element to it and, and whatnot, and looking at an issue that engenders passion on multiple fronts. So it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And just, I mean, last year's conference was still a little bit hampered by, there was a COVID spike, I think, right around that time. I think Omicron was maybe right before it. And I think people were still a little bit reluctant to be out and about and whatnot. And so this year, I think it looks like they have a lot more people coming as far as both attendees and vendors. And so it'll be interesting just to kind of be out and about with everyone again. Hopefully everybody, hopefully everybody's feeling well and not, too loosey-goosey about that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it'll just be nice to just kind of, it does feel a little bit more like a return to normal a little bit, and it'll just be nice just to be there.
Always exciting to be in the Hyatt in Chicago or whatever. Like, it's not like we spend way too much time of our lives in that hotel.
My favorite hotel.
This is the last year, though, isn't it? It's just the last year of the Hyatt, or
that's the rumor. That's the rumor. I don't know if I can talk about that.
I told you.
Steve might have some more info on that, but
nobody's listening.
I know nothing. No, I would reiterate what Victor said. I mean, there's a lot of buzz around the show and a lot of people signing up. A lot of vendors are going to be there. I'm very hopeful and optimistic it's going to be like we return to 2020 again. And so it should be really cool.
The good parts of 2020, not the bad.
That's right. Well, it was the last show before 2020 became 2020.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I remember thinking that if the show had taken place like 2 weeks later, we would have been canceled.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Good. Well, we're looking forward to it. And I always have to put in a plug for Startup Alley opening night event of.
That's right. Bob will be doing Startup Alley again as usual. So yeah, that'll be fun as well.
Yep.
And if you're going to Startup Alley, you're going to go to it, get there a few minutes early because it's usually standing room only.
Yeah. And get really drunk first and heckle everybody.
Right.
Except me. Don't heckle me.
Can you drink during it and heckle you? Like, what's going on?
You can drink during it, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know what the format is this year.
Historically, yeah.
I don't have any details on what the
open
format
bar.
is this year.
Yeah.
Last year there was an open bar. Yeah.
Last year was a bar.
I'm very excited.
Sponsored by some law practice management company. I don't think it was my case, but
was it Clio?
Might have been Clio.
It
was Clio. Let me be definitive about that. But I haven't heard. I don't know if that's happening again this year or not. But and then Joe, I don't know. Is there anything to say about Filevine? We were at the Filevine conference. They had lots of keynotes. I mean, like every other panel was a keynote. It seemed like they kept calling them all keynotes.
I guess maybe not keynote. There were a lot of plenary sessions.
Okay.
Whether or not they were technically keynotes. Yeah, no, very interesting stuff. I've never been there before. It was one of their earlier, like they've only done 4 of these, I think. And obviously they were not doing them during the pandemic. And it seemed like this exceeded their expectations. I spoke with some folks who said that there were around 900 to 1,000 people there. That
I heard
850. Some people suggested it was almost half. I don't think it was that, but like a third of them signed up in the last 2 weeks because they made an extra push and people were like, yeah, let's go. So it was a really good show considering they had a rush of people they weren't expecting right at the end. And it's always nice to be out in a beautiful area of the world. It is we had snow, but we didn't get snowed in at any point. I could imagine that could be a problem with that time and location going forward. But yeah, we heard some interesting stuff. You spoke, Bob. You were part of one of the opening keynote.
I was, yeah. And Dan O'Day, who was in the audience, was there as well. I don't know if anybody else in the audience was there, but it was really interesting. I kept comparing it to, I was recently at the Net Documents conference back in, what was that, November or something in Denver. And I mean, they're both user conferences, and they were both probably more or less similarly sized in terms of attendance. This might have been a little bit bigger than the Net Documents one, but I think they're interesting because the user conferences kind of have to walk this balancing act between providing sort of really sort of practical hands-on stuff about their product while also wanting to present programming on, what's next in legal and what are the hot topics facing the legal profession and all of that. And I thought they did a good job with that, just like I thought the Net Documents Conference did a good job with that. It was I'm not highly familiar with the Filevine platform, but I learned some stuff about the Filevine platform, but I also just got some good takeaways from some of the more general programming there.
I mean, the biggest thing I kind of took away was like right at the very end when they were talking about like some of their last upcoming advances. Because I think of Filevine as doing a lot of, I mean, they're agnostic technically, but doing a lot of the like mass tort sorts of world. Like that's a lot of their market. And then they introduced an accounting plugin. It's not plugin, but an accounting function.
Integration.
It's more complex than a plugin. That was a cooperation with Oracle. And putting aside my general hatred of Oracle, I feel like it spoke to me that it might be more of they're making a play at some more big law customers, because I don't necessarily know as though a mass tort firm needs Oracle, whereas big law firms kind of have that.
They pivoted a little while back. They started out, if I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure about this, 99%. They started out as basically like PI and mass torts. And then about a year ago, they kind of, I think there was like a press release or announcement, and they kind of pivoted and broadened their scope to generally be more law practice management in general, rather than focus on a specific practice area. And then maybe the mid-market is what they're going after. The Oracle does seem to indicate that for sure.
Yeah, because it was PI and it was definitely correct. PI and mass tort. They have there was a whole breakout session, one of the few it wasn't few, but one of the non-plenary sessions. There was a breakout session about immigration that was really interesting. So I know they're moving into some different areas, but like big law, I hadn't necessarily seen until I saw this whole Oracle NetSuite thing. And I was like, I think it was Dan in the audience who said to me at one point, like something like, don't you need like 20 million or so or some amount, I can't remember, to make that even worth it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. What's interesting, I also heard, I have not been able to confirm this yet, but that one of their major competitors also, well, no, not one of their major competitors, a major law firm, a major personal injury law firm is actually already using Oracle NetSuite in some ways. So that, but that's not on their platform. So that was interesting. I mean, they acquired Outlaw last year, which is a contract lifecycle management platform. So they're kind of going off in a bunch of different directions. But I mean, they've grown phenomenally. I mean, I visited them when they were based in Provo back in 2020, the week after ABA Techshow in 2020. I was out in Provo and I visited them, and then they were still kind of small and in a smallish office there, and now they've moved into much bigger space in Salt Lake City, and have other offices, and raised a couple $100 million or something along the way. So good company.
Very interesting company.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are out of time. Steve Lerner, thanks so much for sitting in with us today. And to everybody else, thanks for listening. Thanks for participating. We will be back. I guess we'll be back next week. And maybe we can all get together and do something at Tech Show or something. When are people going to Tech Show? Is that next week? Next Friday? No, that's
Following.
no, it's
week.
not till the following week, right? So yeah,
The district. is next.
we should be here next week. All right, everybody have a good weekend.
Happy long weekend, everyone.
Yay, presidents.
Yeah.